Good evening. I'm Felix Lebeski, and welcome back to SL Tonight. The vault is open once more. 4 short tales of terror pulled from the pages of Golden Age horror magazines. Stories of the dead who refuse to rest, of things that walk in the dark, and of the thin line between the living and the damned. This is Beware. The SL Tonight Vault is Haunted, Volume 2. First, in a cold tenement on a winter night, a landlord comes to collect the rent from a family that has already paid a far greater price. This is Little Lady. Mr. Mulcahy cursed, facing the miserly task of going down twisting alleys behind his dilapidated tenements and collecting rents. Around him, the cold night air howled, and there was a suspicion of snow. He glanced fearfully from side to side as he picked his way over trash heaps and around puddles. Dangers might lurk here, he knew. Any kind of dangers, even the unreal kind that folks had spoken of in the old country. It wasn't a healthy place to be in, and Mr. Mulcahy thanked whatever gods he had that he didn't live as poorly as his tenants. His face lit up with a momentary flash of remembrance of his fine Park Avenue apartment and its comfort. Then he scowled as he thought of Dorgan, his agent. It was Dorgan who usually made the collections, but Dorgan was ill and Mr. Mulcahy had to make the rounds himself. In his pocket he felt the wad of currency he had already collected. The O'Flynns had paid, and the Mulligans too, and Jim Riordan and the family over him. That left only the O'Gurvins. Again he scowled. Dorgan had reported the O'Gurvins as an uppity crowd, always poor, yet proud and clannish. They talked incessantly of their ancient ancestry, but seldom had any extra penny to clink against another, and every once in a while they let the rent slide. Mr. Mulcahy entered the door of the last tenement and shuddered, thinking of that awful climb to the 5th floor on which the O'Gurvins lived. His heart wasn't good, and he hesitated before risking the first step. He had had an attack once before, and it had terrified him. In fact, as he remembered it, it was the sheer fear of death that made it worse. He knew that, and he also knew that what he thought about, in those few minutes in which he'd almost died, were the comforts he'd be leaving for the cold darkness of the grave. On the 3rd floor, Mr. Mulcahy paused. His heart was pounding badly. Again he considered giving up the task. But he thought of the O'Gurvins letting the rent slide again stiffened his resolution. He determined to have it out with them, with the old matriarch who ruled the clan, for the father was long dead. He'd take no more of their plaints of poverty. If they couldn't pay, out they'd go. At the 5th landing he could scarcely draw breath, but then his heart eased and he advanced to the cracked door and knocked. It opened slowly, and a little girl looked out. "Oh," she began, "you're Mr. Mulcahy." Mr. Mulcahy scowled at the presumption. How could the child have known him, he thought, as he brushed past her. He had never set foot within the tenement before this moment. The darkness of the room made him pause. His eyes swung slowly to the circle of family faces, then to the wan figure on the bed. His eyes blinked at the tapers burning fitfully at its head and foot. "I've come for the rent," he said uneasily. 4 pairs of eyes, big as owls, fixed on him. The little girl who'd opened the door, he noticed she was the oldest of the family of 5 daughters, came quietly around and stared at him. "My mother is dead, Mr. Mulcahy," said simply. Mulcahy glanced at the sheet-covered figure, then back at the little girl. About 14, he'd say, but not big as her age, pinched of visage, almost gaunt as were the others. "I've come for the rent," he repeated. "I've no wish to intrude on your sorrows." The girl shook her head. "There's money only for the funeral," she said. "Surely you can wait until next month." The chill air within the dingy rooms was cold as a marble monument. Mulcahy shivered. The dead pay no rent, he said, trying to stare her down, but oddly failing, for her eyes glowed. You'll be wanting to live here, won't you? You can't live in a tomb. A ghostly smile lit up the girl's face. True, she said, but the dead must be paid respect. You won't deny. I deny nothing, he said testily, and extended a hand. The girl's face stiffened. Her lower lip curled. The neighbors said you were a hard man, Mr. Mulcahy, she said, her voice ringing like brass. But until now I had never realized you were quite so heartless. You're an uppity lot, he grumbled. Especially you, a chit of a girl, to be talking that way. I'm the oldest now, of an ancient family, the girl said, and waved a hand at the wan circle of pale faces. Her face was proud. I and my sisters become of the blood of kings and the things older than Ireland. She glanced at the dead figure of her mother, and Mulcahy's eyes swung to the corpse with hers. City will bury her, Mulcahy said. Why waste your money on a funeral? His eyes grew bleak and his mouth hard, and he extended his hand again. The rent, he demanded. Before him the four children parted to allow the girl to pass. He went to the kitchen cupboard, took out a jar, and from it some money. She handed it to him. It is fitting that a family bury its own dead, Mr. Mulcahy, she said, but we will take your advice and have the city bury our mother. He fumbled in his pocket. I'll give you your receipt, he began, but paused as the girl raised a hand, shaking her head. There'll be no need, she said. You'll be dead soon, Mr. Mulcahy. From the dead, we need nothing. Angrily, Mulcahy whirled, slammed the door behind him. He stopped. Blood freezing as shrill wails burst from the rooms behind him. Like tigers, he thought, or vicious cats bewailing death. Mulcahy's face twisted in scorn. So had it been, as he knew in the old country where an elder died. The morning was unseemly, almost savage. He shuddered virtuously. Behind him the shrills arose, spiraling to some dizzying, disappearing height, then stopped abruptly like the cry of a night beast, his throat cut by a swift knife. Dead he'd be, Mr. Mulcahy chuckled to himself as he put the old government money in his fat wallet and started down the steps. It was not for them to talk of death with its dank presence in their own home. It was for them to worry about, not him. A sudden thought made him pause as he reached the fourth landing. The girl had spoken of his death. But why? What could she know of him? And how could she have known his name? Again an uneasy feeling ran through Mr. Mulcahy like a snake. He shook his head impatiently. Already his heart was pounding with the exertion of descending the stairs. Then the stab of pain hit him with shuddering force, toppling him down the whole third flight. At the bottom he lay bruised and battered and weak. He tried to call out, but failed. Trembling, he felt for his pulse. It fluttered like the beat of a sick bird's wing. Abruptly, Mr. Mulcahy realized he was dying. Dying. Dying alone and unattended, with no one to help him. His strength was leaving him. He hadn't the power to call out. Suddenly he heard the footsteps on the stairs. He glanced up. It was the old Girvan girl. She pulled her shawl about her as she came down the steps and stopped, watching. Her eyes were grave, cold as the heights of the Conmars, he thought, calm as the swans on the Liffey as he carried them through Dublin, which he had seen as a boy. Help me, he managed to whisper. It is not in me to help, Mr. Mulcahy, she said, and her voice was as thin as a mountain wind, yet vibrant with power. That is not my business. My business is to warn. To warn? He asked, trying to rise, but falling back. I'm an old Girvan, she said. Like my dead mother before me, I'm a banshee, a harbinger of death, as all good folk in the old country believe. It is not the old country here, she continued, but even here in America we live among our people, wailing to them when death approaches so they can make their peace with God. She paused, and her lips were grim. I told you I came of the blood of kings and of the things older than Ireland. But you're keening, you're wailing, he gasped. It was for your mother. It was for you, Mr. Mulcahy. she said softly, and yet with an edge to her voice. We are things of the spirit and recognize the taint of death on your own. You will not have time to make your peace with God. Even now, you are dying. His hands clutched for her, but she skipped away lightly, like a wraith, and as the darkness closed in upon him, he heard her say, The dead must be buried, Mr. Mulcahy, and my mother waits for the city to come and take her to rest. Was that not the advice a dead man gave us? The end. Next, deep in, beneath an old castle, when a man faces a creature from the other side, and a deadly brew that dissolves both flesh and hope. In Brew of Death. Fool! Screeched the thing. Do you think to save one who must die? Back so that you may have a better look at her writhings and listen the better to her cries when she dies. As yet the girl had not stirred to consciousness, and at this I was tremendously thankful. Best that she was not aware of the death in store for her, slow and agonizing dissolution under the creeping mist of the devil's brew, a brew I recognized as sulfuric acid. It had pooled there in a depression in the stone, an oily, sinister blotch of its shining under the flares, and alongside it, rilling along the sand to disappear where the rocky floor of the place gave way to earth, was a stream of water collected from the rain pounding overhead. I stared, and wild hope grew within me. Not an instant did I hesitate. I gritted my teeth, for what I meant to do was agony, yet no agony such as that in store for my beloved. You fiend, I gritted at the thing. I'll be a match for you yet. I rolled over and deliberately placed my bound wrist in the pool of sulfuric acid. Pain bit through me, into my brain until my senses reeled. Resolutely I kept a course I was determined to follow. For a full half-minute I held my wrists there, then I jerked them away, to dig them into the stream of running water. I took care that the thing which bound them did not get wet. Water laved away most of the acid from my flesh, but the terror brew clung there on the hem of the thongs, burning away slowly. The thing returned with another bottle of the brew, but before those dead eyes set in flaming sockets stared at me, I dipped my wrists once more into the acid and washed my flesh, as far as I was able, with water. So you're afraid to see her die? The thing jeered. But die she will, for I must rid the world of the Corrigan. I gritted no answer. Behind my back, where the awful eyes of the thing could not probe, I strained my wrists apart, hoping, praying that the acid would so weaken the cords that I could wrench my hands free. This time I shall take care of the mate of Edward Corrigan, gibbered the thing as he tilted the opening jug above the white still body. This time she shall die, and then, Edward Corrigan, you die the same death, and the world will have purged of the black blood of the Corrigans, and I shall return whence I came. And then Alice stirred. I could see the gleam of the flares on her black eyes as she opened them, and consciousness came into her. I could see the comprehension in them, followed by the terror that seared through me and forced my wrists apart harder and harder until sweat ran from my face, and it seemed that the fibers of the hemp must purely burst. And my beloved's white body, tense like a spring, tore against the straps about wrists and ankles, lifted a little way from that peacock-hued plate, and held there momentarily, then slumped back again. The thing's wild gibberish gurgled out. You shall not escape, you shall die, dissolved into nothingness, as Edward Corrigan shall die, leaving no trace behind. And the mouth of the jug was dipping closer and closer to the top of the rocker, and now a thin, oily trickle dropped forth upon the top of the peacock-hued plate to roll with slow speed down the metal expanse towards Alice. The thing laughed wildly from the mouth that was not a mouth. He touched the curved pieces of wood which the rocker stood, and thus imparted to the whole machine a slow back-and-forth motion that washed the acid from side to side, but at the same time speeded up its course towards the girl. A thin, hellish mist, so choking that it made my senses reel, lifted from the acid. There was a thin hiss of sound. and where the liquid had passed on the metal behind, there was no longer a peacock hue that glittered terrible beauty in the flame of the flares. There was only a brassy expanse of copper sheet burned clean of life and beauty. It was a change from life to death, such a change as that in store for Alice. She will die, the thing gloated, as if reading my thoughts. She will die. She will dissolve into nothing, but slowly, slowly, so that your ears may be filled with her cries, and you may feel a little of what is in store for you yourself. She will die, slowly, slowly, first her hair eaten away, then the flesh of her face, then her shoulders, those soft, white shoulders. His gap of a mouth gurgled to eerie mirth. He tilted the jug and sent a fresh flood of acid down the metal sheet, while his foot on the rocker kept the whole infernal cradle in a slow, sideways motion that swept the acid forward in tiny waves. Another instant now. The ropes around my wrist parted. I rolled over again as if in great excitement and thus concealed myself partially below the lowered end of the cradle. My fingers plucked frenziedly at the cords about my ankles, twisted and tore until blood spurted from my fingertips. Within the space of a few seconds I had torn the hemp apart. Free and with fury throbbed like a wave through me, I jerked to my feet. She shall die, the thing was intoning, when I came upright. I seized the lower end of the cradle and with a terrific heave lifted it in higher than the other end. I kicked a rock under it to block it permanently. The flood of acid, halted only a fraction of an inch away from Alice's head, rolled back towards the thing in an oily flood, and spilled over the edge with a hiss like the sound of flames in nether. She shall die, and I who am come from purgatory, the thing had been chanting. You're a man just as I am, I gritted out, and I can tear you to pieces just as I'd tear any man to pieces. I stopped to lift a rock and went at the thing. The jug of acid, which had lifted to swing at me, dropped away when my hurled bit of granite smashed through the glass. You're from hell, try to stop me now, I taunted. The thing turned to run, fled out through a door in the foundation, and into a room dimly lighted by a candle thrust high in the wall. An infernal roar set up as I stumbled after him. From the corner of my eye I glimpsed the hounds of purgatory leased there against the wall, but their sinister import was gone. No longer was there anything in them to rouse terror, just as now I am no longer feared their master, the being who ran from me, headed from a dim stairway. I cut across in front of him. When he turned, cornered, I glimpsed the glint of candlelight on steel. He had drawn a long knife from somewhere in those dark clothes of his. I hesitated no longer, but lifted a long billet of wood lying on the floor and charged it. He thrust at me, and steel ran along my chest, pricked through the skin. The next instant I had beaten him to death, and the knife dropped away from those gleaming hands of his. It was only the work of a moment to free Alice, lift her off that rocket. We passed out through the room in which lay the thing, in which were leashed the dogs of purgatory. Alice's slim shoulders, hard against mine, quivered. What was it? He shuddered. I leaned down, jerked away a phosphorus mask, grotesquely carved, and from beneath it there stared up at us the face of the keeper of the castle in shadow. Locked. He discovered gold, or thought he had discovered gold, I told Alice later, as we sat before a roaring fire in one of the upper rooms of the castle. The gold would have belonged to Jonathan Corrigan, of course, since it was on Corrigan property. Sherlock had to get rid of it. He knew the legend of how the Indian medicine men had cursed the Corrigans in this castle in the shadows. So he made up a story, the hounds of the purgatory. The hounds were simply several dogs which he'd painted with phosphorus. Rain still pounded far above us, and the lightning still shook the castle. But now it was a comforting storm, one that seemed to bring Alice very close to me. I inspected this castle, of course, but I hadn't had time to get down there in the foundation, and it was there that Locke thought he had discovered his gold. He built an apogero, a rocker affair covered with copper plate used to collect flour gold. He knew very little about the metal, apparently, for he was experimenting. He had several different kinds of acid down there, and a lot of mercury, which he used with the rocker, or cradle, as it also called. Evidently, he was sure he'd found gold, but did not know just how to get it. And when were you ready to inspect the basement of the castle? He'd built up the story of the hounds and had even turned them loose to bay. But tonight he determined on his master stroke. He determined to deck himself out as the master of the hounds in his mask and gloves and confront us. He thought it would scare us out for good. When I attacked him, he knocked me away, and then, well, his mind was a little distorted. He saw he couldn't scare us away, so he had to get rid of us somehow, and he was taking the way that would leave no evidence. Alice shuddered, and I tightened my arm around her. In silence, we stared into the comforting fire for a long time. At last, Alice spoke softly in a way that made my pulses pound and lifted me to the height of ecstasy. The black blood of the Corrigans, but it's run out, Edward. It vanished with the Corrigan who began it. To me, it's not black blood. It never will be. I love you, Edward, and I want to stay here with you, here in this castle of the shadows, as we planned. And with you loving me enough to do that, there will never be another ghost to stir in this land, he said. And suddenly the castle of shadows did not seem so dark, so gloomy, for I knew that so long as I had Alice, terror would never again walk through the Badlands. The end. Then, one quiet evening, a husband and wife look up from their magazine and knitting, and find the dead sitting in their living room. In The Intruders. John and Celia Worthington didn't know how it happened. They only knew they looked up, he from a magazine, she from her knitting, and saw them. "My God!" John Worthington gasped. His wife clung close to him. "Say it isn't true," she said, her words coming in stammers. But there was no denying it. They were no longer alone in their living room. There were 4 other people there, people with familiar faces, the people who could never be in their living room. You see, John's mother and father were there, and they were dead. And Celia's Uncle Joshua and Aunt Emily were there, too, and they, too, were dead. "What are you doing here?" John asked those ivory white creatures that walked about the steps of death. None of them answered. Instead, they merely marched around the room. "John, what's happening?" Celia was beside herself. Pure horror ruled her emotion. "Just try to be calm, darling. We can get to the bottom of this." But John had no idea how he would. The figures still marched around them. Sometimes they nodded to each other, sometimes a smile, an ugly, gruesome smile, crossed their faces, but they made no sound. "Speak! Speak!" Celia shouted, looking from one to the other. John held her back. "Please, Celia, please take it easy." "How can I take it easy? Our house is filled with the dead. What can we do? What can we do?" The 4 figures sat down. Their eyes stared straight ahead. "Try talking to them, John. Ask them what they want. Ask them why they're here." John walked over to the creature that once had been his father. "Dad, sir?" he said, not even sure what to call him. "Why are you here? What do you want of us?" The creature had been his father didn't answer. His icy lips parted and let through an eerie smile. "Force him to talk, John. Hit him! Force him! Hit him!" He had become hysterical, and hysteria was wrapping John also. He shook the creature. He yelled at him. Tell me! Do you hear? What do you want from us? Speak! Speak! Speak!" The creature's eyes suddenly became warm. A glow of sympathy came upon its face. It put a hand on John's shoulder. Then finally, it spoke. "John, you'll understand this very shortly. It's always strange at first. It'll take you a while to see there's nothing to say when you're dead." And finally, 2 curious boys decide to investigate the house of an old woman the town calls a witch. What they find inside is more terrifying than any story they've been told. In The Investigation. The 2 little boys stood outside the cottage window, their faces pressed hard against the glass. "Want to go in?" one named Michael asked. "Why not?" his friend Sam answered with a question. I'd like to," said Michael. I just wonder what would happen if she caught us. Aw, she won't come back for a long time, said Sam. Come on, give me a boost. We'll open the window in a jiffy. Sam climbed on his friend's shoulders. He made quick work with the window, and moments later the two boys were inside the cottage. A miserable layout, huh? Sam said with a grunt. Dirty as all get out. Do you think it looks like the house of a witch? Michael almost had to drag out the words. Sam tried to say I'm brave. Never having been in a house of a witch, he said with a smile. I really wouldn't know. No kidding, Sam. Do you think the old lady's a witch? Of course not, said Sam. He really wasn't at all sure, but this was a big chance to show bravery to his slightly timid friend. But why do the people keep calling her a witch, Sam? Maybe they know something they haven't told us? I don't know, but we can look this place over and come to our own answers. Let's go, Michael. The two boys started the investigation. They opened a closet, and a broom fell out. It was a different kind of broom to them. It wasn't neat and clean like those mothers. It had uneven straws that bent to different directions. There was an ugly smell that engulfed the entire broom. Do you think, Michael started, maybe, but we'll have to see more. Suddenly a rat darted by their path. They fell back. Then they fell back again. A black cat followed the rat. What do you think now? Michael whispered. Sam didn't answer. His eyes had caught some weird figurines that were standing on the table. He walked over to them. There was one of the devil, one of an ogre, one of the two-headed Janus, many different horrible distorted figures that defied description. I think she's a wit. Blam! A sudden gunshot blasted into Sam's words. The boys froze for a moment. Then they rushed to the door. They opened it and saw the old woman lying in a pool of blood at their feet. She was dead as any human. Two townsmen, one carrying a rifle, were at the woman's side. I guess we were wrong, said the man with the rifle. But at least it's a load off our minds. Sam smiled to himself as he listened. Then he whispered to Michael, let's go back when they're not looking and get those figurines. 4 more tales from the Haunted Vault. A little girl who knew more than she should. A man who fought death itself for the woman he loved. The dead who returned with a message. And 2 boys who learned that some doors should never be opened. If these stories chilled you, tell me in the comments which haunted tale you want next. Full classic comments available at www.sltonight.com. Thank you for watching. This has been Felix Lebeski. The revolt remains open, and the night is long. This has been SL Tonight. Good night.